Okay, welcome everyone. So, yeah, Jesper and I just started chatting about something he'd emailed me about, and I can fill in everyone on what that was. But first, let's go around and see if there's any questions or issues that you ran into. So, Christian, let's start with you.
Yeah, I had some problems with the 3D view. Yeah,
Okay.
I don't know, it crashes sometimes when it does it, but I don't know what the problem is there, but
Okay, yeah, I think it's probably the least stable
mm,
part of QGIS. It's still under rapid development, and every new release of QGIS it gets better. But
mm,
I do know that people experience it crashing from time to time. So it's hard to know, exactly what might have been going on there. But
yeah,
um, the
yeah,
good
I,
the
I've
good news is that now there's that 3D view manager so that you can save a 3D view and then it's part of the project. So if QGIS crashes, you can open it up and hopefully not lose everything.
yeah, uh, I haven't gotten to it yet, but with the joy plot you showed us with the geometry generator, is that only for like elevation, or
Yeah.
could you do it with like concentrations of something?
Well, it has to be against a raster layer.
Yeah,
It wouldn't have to be elevation. So
okay.
you could have an interpolated surface of concentrations of whatever it is. And you could, yeah. So in the same way, if you had that kind of raster, you could also render it as a hillshade. You could
Okay.
apply different color ramps to it, or you could use that joy plot technique against it.
Okay.
So anything that you could apply to a DEM, you could apply to other raster data sets like that.
Okay.
Could be precipitation, it could be temperature, all whatever else.
Hmm.
Okay, Gladys.
I don't have any questions. So
Yeah, you're done with your assignment. Yeah.
yes, correct.
Okay. Thomas, how about you?
Well, again, it's some technical problems.
Hmm.
Um, I tried to make this a temporal composer, what it was called, a controller, and I thought I would like to instead of using the city development of Helsinki, I would try to use archaeological data.
Hmm.
So all the sites in Denmark, I would cut something out of it and then try to use the data from all the archaeological sites. But the thing is that if I want to make a date, I have a year minus 1700 as it's just a number, but I don't know how to make a date out of it.
Okay. Yeah. We can look at that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It has to be first.
I don't know. I could copy paste or something from one of the columns to another column, or what it was. I don't know. I didn't manage.
It's a little more involved than just a copy paste though. So
Yeah.
I'll show you.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay.
Did
you use the OpenStreetMap archaeological sites from the course data, or did you have your own data?
No, it was my own data.
Okay.
It's my own data. Well, I got all the archaeological sites from Denmark.
Okay.
In a database.
Yes.
Yeah, but it's just it's the number, and I want to change it to a date. And
yeah.
One of the numbers are negative, so I don't know what to do. So I gave up.
Okay.
And then I would. I did the assignment with the Helsinki city development, and how can you change the decorations after you have already pressed OK?
Okay.
Then I thought, well, I want to move it somewhere else, and I couldn't.
Okay. I'll show you that too.
Yeah. So that's actually the only two things I had problems with. I didn't try the 3D program, so
Okay.
I would love to look
And with
into
the
that, but I
3D,
didn't have the time.
you can play with any of the data sets. You could look at Trelleborg or any
Yeah.
of the data sets
Yeah.
that are in there. So yeah. Okay. And Jesper, anything else for you?
No, I haven't made. I have just made it to the third assignment.
Okay.
And I didn't know which one to pick. I had an idea. I had lots of idea. I didn't go anywhere with it. So I'm still working on it.
Okay. Good. Okay, so let's see. I will share my screen. And I think going back to last week, one thing I forgot to cover at the question and answer session last week was Jesper wanted to know about creating color ramps. So when we created the view of the elevation data with the hillshade renderer using the multiply blending mode over the color DEM, which again uses that single band pseudo color renderer and a color ramp. We used a color ramp that we pulled in from that CPT city catalog that comes with QGIS, but you have to go through a few steps to get to it. So just as a reminder, to do that, we clicked on the drop-down menu for the color ramp, and we could choose any of the ones that we have in our list, but we went instead to create new color ramp. And you get this menu, and there's different types. There's gradient, color presets, random. We use CPT City, and there's color brewer. So for example, if for gradient, we could, choosing this, we could make our own custom color ramp. So we could click OK, and then this brings us into this color ramp designer. And with the basic color ramp, you can just choose the beginning and the ending color. So I could choose, you know, I don't know, maybe a brown, and whoops. If I'm thinking about terrain, you know, another earth tone kind of color, and it will just fill in the colors in between those two colors. These little items here are called color stops, and I can add more to this. I can left click in here and add a new color stop in here, and I can click on that and change that color to something else. So I could start adding more stops in here. And you can move these around to change how the colors fade from one to another, and basically build your own color ramp. So this is, there's also type. This is continuous, and you can also choose discrete. And discrete will let you just choose individual kind of blocks of color. So you can play around with developing your own color ramp just with this tool. And, you know, it can definitely take some time to build a really complicated color ramp with lots of stops in it. But then once you've done that, you can save it. So if I click OK on this, now we have that view of our data using this color ramp. And if I wanted to save this, I'd go back to this color ramp menu and save color ramp. And if I wanted it available in all my QGIS projects, I would choose default instead of project styles. And then I could call it ugly color ramp. And you can tag it if you want. And if you choose add to favorites, it'll show up in that initial list. If I click add to favorites and click save, I should now see my ugly color ramp here in the list.
In the edit mode, did it show the height in the plot?
Oh no, it won't show the height. This is just a color ramp. So all it is
No, but if you click edit, there was a plot chart.
oh, let's see. Yeah, if I edit color ramp, oh, down here.
Yeah.
So this is just showing between 0 and 1. And so you can go in here and use this to change the colors too in this plot and control how colors, you know, fade into one another and how saturated the color is. I don't personally use this interface much, but so I don't really oh, here it's controlling the lightness. So I have lightness selected. So as I move this color up, it becomes lighter. Move it down, it becomes more saturated and darker. You can also choose saturation and control the saturation of one of those colors. Or you can choose hue and you can control the hue of the color. So you can use this control just if it's easier for you to develop the color ramp using that tool. And then if you decide you don't want one of these stops, you can select a stop and choose delete and remove it from the color ramp. So that's the editing interface. So I could go back to my original terrain one that I downloaded from that other CPT City library, and I could go into edit mode for this color ramp and see how this color ramp was built. And this is here we go. No, that's not what I wanted. I wanted to just edit the color ramp. There. Why isn't it? Why isn't it letting me edit it?
See, this is where my question started.
Oh yeah. Usually it'll take me right into the same editor.
Yep, I don't think that we are allowed to edit these ones in that has been imported. I don't know.
I just was looking at it before the class started, so I'm not sure why it's not letting me now. Okay, so what I just did was I went into I'll probably have to go into CPT City again and find this same one, topography. I think it's SDA, and then when I went in here and it wasn't letting me edit it, I had to click this button, save as a standard gradient. And I think that puts it into a format that's editable. So I click OK, and now I can go back into edit and see how that color ramp is constructed and start changing the different stops. So you can see this one is built out of 30 or 40 different stops probably. And so you can see how this was built. And this is a discrete color ramp. And, choose just a lot of stops with different colors. You could also set it to continuous.
But so the classification values, are those steps divided into the different color sets, the colors, the nodes on the ramp?
So that has to do with how it's classified here. So we have it set, it's set to continuous by default. So the color ramp goes from, left to right across those colors. And we have our minimum and maximum data value in our data set. So QGIS is simply going to stretch the color ramp linearly across all the values. So that's how it's applying the colors to the individual pixels. It's doing a computation where it understands the histogram of the data values, and it basically stretches the data from the lowest elevation value to the highest data value linearly across that color ramp. So it's basically using this histogram here to place to color each pixel value based on the elevation. But so we also have other settings. There's linear, there's discrete, there's exact, and for any of these you can get different views of it. The default is linear with these, and then down here you also have other settings. You have these control how QGIS basically divides the data up into these different bins, or these different classes. And so this is the continuous setting. If we apply equal interval, it's going to basically make sure that the difference between the minimum and maximum value of each class is identical. So maybe a value of 1 meter or something. So if I choose, so we can see it has 47 classes here. And if I choose equal interval, it's going to make sure that each class has the same range relative to the others. And then there's quantile, which tries to put the same number of pixels into each class. So you will get different views of the data based on the mode. So this is really controlling how the data are being applied to the color ramp, how it's breaking these into different classes. So I hope that made sense. The default for, especially for elevation, is continuous, where it's a linear stretch from minimum to maximum, but you can try these other settings. Equal interval is usually almost exactly the same, but quantile will definitely give you a bigger difference because it's going to try to put the same number of pixels in each class. Does that help, Jesper?
Yes,
Okay.
especially the save to the little mark you had to check in order to be able to save the thing, because it wasn't on my screen.
Yeah. So if we're going to create a color ramp, there's another library in here called Color Brewer. So this is helpful if anyone is ever working with people who are colorblind. And Color Brewer is created by this woman, Cynthia Brewer, who's a cartographer. And she has come up with color palettes that are designed to help people distinguish features on a map better. These aren't really, none of these are useful for elevation, though. These are more for making a map of population by municipality or something like that, but they're not so useful for elevation. And there's a corresponding website, Color Brewer 2. Let me put this in the chat. So this site can be useful sometimes because you can go in here and design your own color ramp in here, and then try to apply that in QGIS using the same color values. She usually uses these hexadecimal values, which you can copy and paste into QGIS. But you can choose different kinds of data, decide how many classes you want there to be in the color ramp, and then you can make sure it's colorblind safe or print friendly or photocopy safe. So you can check these different boxes. And the color ramp that is output for greens, for example, will then be more colorblind safe than with the box unchecked. So this can be a useful site. And so there's also a setting for terrain here. So you could try to design one for terrain. Well, that's actually just the background. But so scratch that comment. Doesn't really help you design one for terrain other than choosing earth tones like this. So but that's a useful site. And in case you ever have to work with a colorblind map reader, QGIS has a feature right under decorations, which we're going to look at, called preview mode. So you can put QGIS into a mode that simulates how it would look to a person with a specific type of color blindness. And so you can see if your map is going to be readable by that person. So if you have, someone who has a specific type of color blindness, you can choose that and you'll see what the map will look like to them. And it's a very challenging task usually to develop a map for both someone who's colorblind and someone who is not, because for someone who's colorblind, the map looks good to you normally isn't going to look good to them, and vice versa. But you can at least simulate it in QGIS so that you can determine if it's going to work or not. Normally, it's the reds and the greens that cause problems for most colorblind map readers. Okay, so I want to switch into looking at the temporal controller. So I know there's a data set in here for, I think, for archaeology. Yeah. Gosh, not going to see it. Where do I have that? Anyway, let me just try to work with the data for the town, and I can try to use that as an example of how to handle formatting dates for the temporal controller. So what? Okay, so the key for having data that's going to work with the temporal controller is that it has to be in a column that's set up to store time. So if we go to the layer properties for this buildings layer, here we go, and we go to the fields tab, QGIS will tell you the data type of each field. And you can see there's some here that are date and time. So if you have time, but it's stored in a text field, or time that's stored as an integer, as a number, it won't work in the temporal controller. We have to convert it to a time field. So here's another date column in here. So so you can see here there's year as an integer, and then there's the date column. So I had to massage this a little bit to make it suitable for the class. So you can go in here and you can see here's the date for each building. It has just January 1st and the year. And what we were interested in for using the temporal controller was just having the year in a date column. So what I had to do was put the table into edit mode. And first you have to add a new field, and you can call it time. And you have to set that to date or date and time. So the difference between date and time is date will be set up just to store day, month, year, whereas date and time will also be set up to store hours, minutes, and seconds. So here we can just choose date and click OK. And we have now a new empty field called time. And if we have this data here, that is, again, this data is numeric. Is that correct? Yeah, the date is date, year is integer. Okay, never mind. I had that backwards. So year is what I had. So year is stored as an integer, and we needed to have it as a date. So this data here is just stored as numbers. So this might be like what you have, Thomas. So to put that into this new column as an actual date, we need to first set the field that we're going to calculate to our new time field. So time here is now the active field that we're going to put values into. And we're going to use an expression. So we're going to open up this expression button. And I should say there's two ways to do this. This is usually the interface that I use is this little widget here. However, you can also use the field calculator. And I think a lot of people are trained to use this as well. So we can do it in both. It doesn't really matter which way you choose. So let's try this. I use the field calculator. So if I open up the field calculator, I would tell QGIS that I want to update an existing field, and that field is going to be time. And so what I need is a format date conversion tool. So there's a function called toDate, and that will take something that's not a date and convert it to a date format. So we have the year stored as a number, and we're going to use this to convert it to a date. So I double click on toDate, and we can read here that it needs either a string or let's see if this will work with number. The problem with doing kind of a live demo, sometimes I may not have the perfect workflow and I may have to go back. Let me see. Let's try this. So toDate, and we're going to go into fields and values and find that year data, year data. So again, the 1, 2, 3 indicates that it's numbers, and the little calendar icon indicates that these are date columns. So we're going to convert the year to a date, and we can again search for toDate to read the syntax. It doesn't really have any syntax that it needs. So I'm just going to close the parenthesis, and it says expression invalid. I think it's because this is a number and not a string, and this needs a string. So unfortunately, I think I need to do a second one more step. Let me open up the field calculator again, and I'm going to create a new field, and I'm going to call this year string. Sometimes, Thomas, this is what you have to do. You might have to go through a few different steps.
Is it not because you need to add the date and the month as string?
Well,
So
the problem is that the year right now is stored as a number, not a string. And that function only works against a string. So we need to convert that first from a number to a string and then to a date.
Okay.
So I'm going to create a new field, and I'm going to call it year string. And I'm going to populate that with year. So this is going to create a new field called year string. And it's going to be, importantly, a string field. And the date I'm using is in the year column, which again is number. So I'm going from this number column into this new text, also known as string column. So I'll click OK. And QGIS will do the calculation. So now I have those same values stored as text. And this, a quick hint as to how the data is stored. If it's on the left side of the cell, it's text. If it's on the right side of the cell, like this, right justified, it's a number. You can always assess what format data is in just by which side it's on in the cell. So now I have it as a string. So now I should be able to go back and do the same thing I was going to do. Update an existing field, which is going to be called time. We already have. And I'm going to use that same to date. And I'm going to feed this that new string field I just populated, the year string. Still telling me it's not valid. Why is that? What else does this need? Oh, the formatting tag, I guess. So it needs to know what format to put the data in, so we can tell QGIS we want it to be why isn't that working? It should be it. Okay. So I have it just formatted as a year with 4 Ys. And now it's happy with that. So it's taking the 4-year string, 4-digit string, and converting it to a date. So I can click OK. And now I have time populated from here. So I had to move it from a number to a string and then to a date.
What about if it's a year before Christ? It's a negative year. Will it work?
That's a good question. Let me save this and open up the temporal controller. I think so I could go into my layer and go to the temporal tab and tell it that it's going to use this new time field that I just created. And there's nothing in here about I know this came from a plugin called what was Anita Grauser's plugin? There was basically a version of the temporal controller for years that was a plugin, and it had a setting for archaeological time that would honor BC, but I don't know if this has that. I don't know what. It's a really good question. Just doing a quick Google search. GIS Stack Exchange is usually where I go to find things like this. So here it says the date-time field basically is not designed with pre-Christ dates in mind. Is that true? Huh. Wow, Thomas, I think you may have found a limitation. Yeah, this is what I was thinking. In the old Time Manager plugin, there was this archaeological mode, and it would, so you could force it to deal with, before Christ timestamps. That's interesting. I know the developer of this temporal controller, and I think I'll send him an email and with your question and ask him how it's possible to handle those kind of dates in the temporal controller, because it does not seem to be set up for it at the moment, but there must be a way to deal with that. Obviously, for an archaeologist like yourself, dealing with only time back to zero isn't very useful. So there must be something, but I'm not sure the answer. So I'll get back to everyone on that. The other question was about these decorations. And if you want to like move this legend, for example, or turn it off or edit it, you can go just back to the view menu to decorations and just select which decoration you want to edit or disable. So I could check the image, and I could just turn it off like that by just disabling it. Or if I wanted to move it, I could just change the position and click apply. Now it's up here. So all you have to do is go back to the view menu to decorations, and I could, for the title label, again, I could go in and make any changes to it I want or turn it off, and then click OK, and my settings will be saved. So that's fairly easy. You just have to go back.
Yeah, it's too easy.
Yeah. So yeah, let's see. Any other questions about what we've been looking at so far? I thought I would show you some of the other new renderers that have been introduced. This is from a presentation that I gave to the Danish QGIS user group. And so this is a slide that shows you all these renderers that we've been working with for each geometry type and rasters. So, we've used hillshade and contours and single band pseudocolor. We've used inverted polygons. We've used, a lot of these, point cluster, heat map, and then all the symbol layer types, we've used or looked at geometry generators, centroid fills, shape burst fills, but there have been several new ones added in recent releases of QGIS. So there's this new symbol layer type for lines called line burst. And this is basically like a shape burst fill, but for lines. There's also one called a raster line. And then there's, for polygons, the outline equivalent for those. So outline line burst, outline raster line. And there's also animated marker, which allows you to use an animated GIF as a marker on a map. So I have some examples of these that I can show you. So this is some building footprints, and I've used the geometry generator to just convert them to lines. And then I'm combining the geometry generator with line burst. So line burst basically lets me apply a color ramp to the outline, to basically to the line itself. So I'm showing just the outline of these buildings, but styling it with a line burst, so I can choose a color ramp and make it thicker. So this is one use I thought of for this particular symbol layer type. So I would say the symbology in QGIS has gotten so powerful at this point that a lot of these changes get to be very specific. So there may be, you know, this is something you just kind of keep in the back of your brain. Someday you may think, oh, that would be a really good use for the line burst symbol layer type when you're trying to make a map for something and want to show a line in a certain way. This is that raster symbol layer type, raster line. So here I have some hiking trails, and I'm going to apply the raster line symbol layer type as the symbol layer type, and then I just browse to a little footprints bitmap that I had. And so it basically shows that line as repeating that bitmap image over the length of the line. So this one shows footprints. So it's a nice way to show a walking path. Instead of actually being a line, you show, you know, footprints along the path. And you can control the size and the opacity and other things. So those are all both. So since these were introduced both at 3.2.4, that means they're in the current long-term release 3.2.8 that we're using. So you have access to these symbol layer types. Here I'm just increasing the size. There's also new settings. So we looked at marker line when we created the colorful map of Danish municipalities, and we use the width interval, but there's these other choices in here. So this little GIF shows setting different options for this marker line. So you can choose the first point, the midpoint, the last point. So this can be a good way to highlight different parts of a line, basically. So here I've set up several different marker line renderings for these lines. So I can show a different symbol for the end, the middle, and the beginning, just as an example. Let's see. These are very specific. Oh, there's new settings for a lot of the renderers. So this is the point pattern fill, where I put the Danish flag on all the municipalities as a raster image marker. And there's a new alignment setting that allows you to change how it's aligned. So here the image will cross the border, whereas the default setting cuts it off. So that's just one new setting for this existing point pattern fill symbol layer type, the alignment, align to feature versus align to map extent. So very subtle tweaks. This is the point pattern fill. So there's a whole section of new settings for this symbol layer type that allows different clipping behavior and allows you to change this angle so that you can rotate those symbols within the polygon. And there's also settings for randomizing the pattern with horizontal and vertical offsets so that you can come up with a random distribution of those. It almost then becomes like the random pattern fill, which is another symbol layer type. Let's see. We looked at this one already. This is using that new scale function with a geometry generator to create what's called a cartogram, where the polygons are sized by one of the data values. And then we looked at all the wave functions. So I'll go through those. Let's see. And here's the animated markers. So here is using some of that storm data we have, and I downloaded from the Danish Meteorological Institute lightning data. And so I had points for lightning, and I found an animated GIF for lightning bolt. And so you can apply that animated GIF as the animated GIF for the animated marker, and then you can control the frame rate, how fast it goes, and the width and the height. So again, I don't know how many real world applications there are of this, but it is certainly interesting. And if you ever had a good use case for it, it certainly would be eye-catching if you were able to use it in a good way.
Would it also, if you have a VMS server or WFS service, you can set QGIS up to do that?
Well, you can set QGIS up. There's like the thing called QGIS server that you can use to serve data out as VMS, VFS services.
Yeah.
VMS is what stands for Web Map Service, and that's only for basically serving out a map image to a client such as QGIS or a website, and you can't change the symbology of a VMS service. But the VFS is the actual features. It stands for Web Feature Service, and you can change the symbology of a VFS service. So you could apply something like this to a VFS point layer.
Okay.
Yeah. So when you have VFS, it's the same thing as like having a shapefile. It's just being served over the internet. You're getting access to all the features, all the attributes, so you can do anything with it in QGIS that you could do to, for example, a shapefile.
Okay. We do have it's set up to do both, and we use it in different scenarios. I mean, one of them keeps that would be the WMS service that keeps the symbology of the layers that we set up.
Yes.
So we would probably be able to use this if we found it useful somehow.
Yeah. Yeah, perhaps. And so yeah, VMS is useful for aerial photography or things like that are big base map kind of layers that people aren't going to want to change. You're not usually going to want to re-symbolize aerial photography, for example. It is what it is. And it's very large data. So VMS is a very efficient way of serving that out. But when you have features like roads or, municipal boundaries, those are better served out as VFS so that people get the actual data that they can use to do things with.
But the base map that we get from the data forsyning, are those not WMS
it is
based as well?
Yep. So yeah, this scam quote dimple is VMS. Yep. Let's see. So we didn't really look at point clouds much, but I do have an example here. go back to this map. I do have a point cloud layer for this same study area. And so I could provide this if anyone is interested. And if we look at the layer styling panel for a point cloud layer, you have several different renderers available. You can choose like attribute by ramp, and you could look at the elevation, the Z values, and color the point cloud by elevation. And you, again, you're going to have the same options where you could choose a color ramp and classify it just like you would with raster data. Oh, and QGIS crashed. Oh no. But there's other renderers for point clouds, and they also work well in 3D, which was what I was hoping to be able to show you in the last few minutes here. So here's my point cloud. Close the temporal controller. And you should be able to also change this to classification. So this will break the point cloud up into different categories of things: low vegetation, buildings, water, etc. But if I bring this back to the RGB, which is, I use some tools to pull in the colors from an orthophoto for the point clouds. You can go to the view menu to 3D views and create a new 3D map view. And let's configure. So let me zoom in. I think QGIS is busy thinking. So I'd want to extrude this a little bit to and zoom in to, because it's still a relatively flat area. So I can go in and configure and set the vertical scale so that it's extruded a little bit and we get a little more detail. And if I go back to the layer styling panel, let me I'll put that there. Down here, there's a thing for point clouds called iDome lighting. And this kind of tries to make some of the features in the point cloud a little more solid. Let me uncheck this so it's not going to try to snap. QGIS really seems to be having problems rendering this. For some reason. Yeah, it's just slow. So this wasn't a very good demo. I didn't really think it out beforehand, but if you have to work with point cloud data and you have specific questions, feel free to ask me. This is another part of QGIS that's getting a lot more attention since it's a fairly new feature. And I've had pretty good success bringing this into 3D, but today I might just have too much open, and on my little laptop, it's struggling a little bit. But you can see as I zoom into some of these buildings with the iDome lighting and the rendering as a surface, you kind of get the texture of these, and in 3D this can look quite nice. You'll have to take my word for that. since it's not really behaving well today. So that's that. The other thing I just wanted
is mesh is cloud it's are one able to snap to the different points?
You can in the elevation profile plot. So if you open up elevation profile and you draw a line across the plot, it will show the individual points, and you can enter a bigger threshold here to get a bigger sampling, and you'll get a nice rendering of the point cloud in the elevation profile plot. And here it is in the profile snapping to individual points so that you can, for example, measure how high something is.
I know somewhere some use it for documenting pipes in the ground, which has been video has been made a short video with an iPhone or something, and then they were able to take it into a program like QGIS. I don't know if it was QGIS, and then made a vector documentation based on the point cloud. So that is a real thing.
Yeah, I mean, point clouds are another very up and coming data format. It's basically like sending a light sensor and firing light at things and getting the reflectance back as a point cloud. And there's a lot that you can do with it. So on a kind of a very local level, like just scanning an excavated hole where a sewer pipe is, for example, you can completely model that in 3D using the point cloud data. And yeah, I've seen at the Danish Court Day some presentations like you're describing, and it can be quite impressive, some of the tools people are building for that. Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. And this is in Denmark. There is open point cloud data for the whole country, so this is available. So we're almost out of time, and the last thing I just wanted to mention are a couple shameless plugs. I may have mentioned these, but I do have two fairly new books that are out now, and QGIS for hydrological applications is very specific to hydrological modeling. I wrote that with my Dutch colleague, Hans van der Kwast, and my part in this was doing the data visualization. So in this book, after every exercise delineating a watershed, for example, we cover how to style the data so that you can make sure the analysis went as you planned. And there's a nice chapter at the end on producing a nice map of your final catchment. And then Discover QGIS 3X. This is a big book. It's 400 pages. And this is a full treatment of QGIS, but it has 5 parts. And the 4th part is cartography. And the 5th part is data visualization, which covers some of the things that we've done in this class, but has additional exercises that we didn't quite get to. So these could be good resources if you're interested, and they're both produced by Locate Press. And so you can order the books anywhere in the world through Locate Press. And they're also available as ebooks. And then the last thing I wanted to let everyone know about is at Septima, we have our fall course calendar set up. So we have, I think this is the last course we have before summer holidays, but we have a whole series of courses coming up starting in August through the end of the year on QGIS and also PostgreSQL and MSSQL. So if any of this is interesting to you, you can read about them more from this page and register if you're interested. I'll put this into the chat. So that's the end of the course. We managed to get through everything, and I think it was a really good class. Everyone was really engaged, which makes it a lot more interesting. So just get me your final assignment when you have the time, and then I will give you your course certificate when you turn that in. And if you have any questions with any of that, just you're welcome to email me, and we'll try to troubleshoot anything that you run into. And I'll send the link out to this session here in a little bit this afternoon. So any final questions or comments?
No, well, I have one thing. For those expressions, I always use Chat GPT, and it really helps a lot.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
If you've got trouble, then with a date, I also went via Chat GPT, and finally I got the end result. So
Wow, that's interesting, because I know Chat GPT sometimes gets most of an expression or a program correct, but sometimes it has to be massaged, from what I've heard. But
yes.
yeah.
So
Have you? There's also a plugin for QGIS for Chat GPT.
yes, I didn't use it yet.
But from what I've seen, it still isn't. It like one of the uses could be like trying to get the coordinates for an address or something. But
Yeah.
it so far it doesn't seem particularly helpful. But it's still early days.
Yes,
Great.
just a tip.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else from anyone? All right. Thanks, everyone. Great class. And hopefully I'll see you around at a conference someday.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah, bye. And
Bye.
thank you.
Thanks for the course.
You're very welcome.